Julie here with Sirius Talisman. This is Venus Hour Soul Day. Venus is 3 degrees Aries, leaving a conjunction with Saturn. And Neptune still sextiling Sedna. And Moon applying to oppose Uranus. So I want to talk about the collective nervous system because the concept that our nervous system has also a physical component. And that component is interactive. I hope makes it simple. When I was in university, other than Epstein-like trafficking rings um, that I said no to and dealt with a lot of things because I said no, there was an experiment. And in that experiment, we were asked to walk in the room and not bump into each other. And we were doing that for several times. The more times we practiced, the more easy it became to not bump into each other. This is due to our nervous system being a collective nervous system, an interactive web of waves and potential activities at micro levels. This is why we're sensitive to sound and waves. This is why when we sing lullabies to babies, they calm down. That and of course touch. Um, People who meditate try to uh, access their point of intervention by um, basically attuning to their own nervous system regulation. And the rituals and egregores that people have um, are also partaken in creating a tendency within also the collective nervous system. So when we have things like excitatory state, if we were sitting at a concert or at um, a football game, then the excitatory state of the nervous system is familiar. There are waves in the crowd, and people may have experience of how flowy and how interconnected the waves can be. Um, this awareness is particularly important because it begins to explain other phenomena that later become not just rituals or egregores, but actions and policies. Um, in societies where there's no ritual abuse, it's easier to share resources and access to water, which no ritual abuse, of course, means zero rape, zero slavery as well. And these societies sustain. In Afghanistan, there is a matriarchy. In China, there are men and women equal societies. They don't live the same life as other societies or other people. Um, and from this point, I want to take into Neptune in Aries and the holistic meaning of security. from the nervous system point of view. Where there is ritual abuse, rape, and slavery, the nervous system attunes to energy of war. For example, where I reside, there were not one but two missiles extremely close to where a lady that's homeless had to inject drugs to relieve pain for when she is raped as a trafficked person, what people call sex worker. Then one day she closed herself in the shelter and she fell asleep. The people outside were concerned. And we simply walked to the stairs in the next building. If a missile was falling on the bunker, it would explode the bunker. It wouldn't help us that we are in shelter. It's a 4 tons of In fact, maybe in an open space there could be some survivors. But what it did do is that the lady whose nervous system was one of the most unregulated due to the violence she goes through was suddenly asleep. And that relaxed. It wasn't relaxing to the people outside, but their excitatory level, even as a group of nervous system, was not anywhere near what would bring a security risk, such as this lady not having a good sleep. Okay, but those people, they will not go to sleep at night because of this event. They will not be raped and addicted and in dissociation because of this event. They are not trafficked, they are not raped, they are not tortured. And in that, even being outside of a shelter, the nervous system regulation and individual human rights collective level was raising, thus making us less susceptible to invasion, a fraction less susceptible to invasion. It's a different approach to security and safety than we would think about when we do not include the collective nervous system, which is a major component in safety and security. If that woman was sleeping outside, she could have tried to warm herself up, and she could have been sleeping in some stairs, and she could have lit a fire, and then a building go boom. She would die. It would not be a missile. But the amount of explosion from gas leaking, and Uranus still sextiles Neptune, gas is leaking. In the bisextile when Neptune was in Pisces, I walked down the street and I take a look at the shelters, and because I had to be close to shelters, and I smell gas. I tried to knock on the doors until somebody answers. I said, this way, people go to shelter, they end up in a gas chamber. And then I saw cards for programming, whether it was Oz or Alice in Wonderland, and the needles. And I saw it was very clear. There is sex trafficking and ritual torture happening around these buildings. Of course, it's becoming like gas chambers. It's the same frequencies of Holocaust. They even call it Holocaust. When they rape someone, they call it Holocaust. In the COVID, there was a young girl that was raped in the hotels that was supposed to be the safe hotels that people went to for the lockdown in COVID. And the people that raped her said that they will give her Holocaust. Jews, Israelis. Um, it doesn't matter how we name it, but the fact is, on a collective level, nervous system level, um, it basically brings Holocaust on the country. Um, it's not about naming the boys or what they did, it's about the frequency on a collective nervous system level. When people do atrocities that are associated with group, even something simple as, it's not simple as revenge porn. It's not the person that tries to do for revenge porn, or even when a person goes so much as to torture and hack nervous system and try to make the person have friends on Facebook that are not usually what they would approve on Facebook because they are tortured. Which is something that happened to me by a psychologist and from academia. Um, what can I say? And it's not just Israel. You can judge my country all you want, but it's not just Israel. If it was, I would be broadcasting from your country. If your country was safer for women, I would be broadcasting from your country. Because I would ask for asylum, particularly after COVID. Um, and if your country is not safer, then the simple truth is that your country is as susceptible as Israel is. Whether you like it or not, whether Israel started it or not. If Israel, and this is exactly the point, but even if somebody does like that, something, if the society cooperates with them, because in the power of community, it can be, but to take that person that did that thing and to calm his nervous system down, and to make sure this nervous system of this person stay regulated, even to hug him, not to torture, not to avenge, not to, but to basically bring his nervous system to level of regulation. Because this psychologist was very likely tortured, was very likely raped, um, was very likely in dissociation. He had also personalities that tried to warn of ritual abuse. And yes, I'm talking about psychologists. And he would be the person at the juncture that decides which child is taken from the parents, which child is not. When that is infiltrated by Epstein-like cult, this is the result that we see. Now, what happens when society not only doesn't calm a nervous system down of the offender, and it makes sure that the nervous system stay calm, make sure everything is in place with trust and safe and free, but participates either in avenging that person, by the way, or in harming the individual that they targeted. Both would get an unregulated nervous system. Now, it is true that to harm the person he targeted would get worse frequency. But I don't think we want to be at the level where these are the frequencies we choose from. Um, Again, of course, that they could execute offender. Because such people are created in an environment where they favor and keep alive those that develop the most terrible qualities. But I still think that they could maintain a person regulated so that he wouldn't become offended. Unless the society is like that, and then the entire society. Which is why societies get persecuted. It's a frequency level. If, let's say, woman said no, woman separated from boyfriend, she didn't rape him, she didn't violate him, she said no. Then this woman is persecuted for saying no. For when this woman is persecuted, entire society basically attunes to the level of persecution. It's a frequency, it's a wavelength, just like when I take a look at light. Okay, they say that to color the rooftops blue helps against direct the energy weapon. Why? Because of frequency. This color less permeable to that particular energy, to that particular frequency. That's it. If I go in the summer with black shirt and black pants, I better not. I better choose something more on spectrum of lighter colors. It might make me look more fat, but I will be in less troubles than if I wear black. Why? Because the black absorbs the light, it takes all the heat. Same as the chemical components of material. They said there's special chemical components where we don't sweat. I bought very expensive shirt that promises that I will not sweat as much in summer. When it's summertime, I can attest if the chemical component changed the behavior of basically interaction of my body with light and air. So when we talk about what is actions that are done, they have a frequency. If women are persecuted for saying no, then a country cannot be sovereign, because let's say tomorrow United States asks Israel not to just attack Iran, but to invade China. If Israel does not have persecution frequencies to women that say no and to men that say no, then Israel is more able to say no, because we've established that saying no is the frequency where we can say, United States, we love you, We are not going to invade China, just like the Allied nations did to the United States. They say, yes, your military basement in Iraq is very important. We're not going to a world war over that right now. And then something was attacked at Norway. Why? Because there's still in Europe situations where saying no could result in loss of residency, loss of housing access, loss of sense of self and security. It is what it is. I do not make the rules, it's the nervous system. Just like with Mars approaching in Pisces, approaching from a loud and approaching Rahu, and said, if people get angry, they can invoke Ares that abolished rape and call him to abolish rape and slavery. In that way, they maintain the frequencies of defending what is right, rather than send those frequencies to egregores that they never asked to be funneling energy to. And it's, yes, Ares is one example. People can invoke a beta per se, Sedna, and so on and so forth. Because the belief of God with Pisces is another layer of existence. It's an egregore layer. Okay, God is an egregore. And we decide which egregore we funnel through our energy, not other people. That's sovereignty. Is reclaiming our egregore. And I talked about it since before 7th October. Now, when we talk about the frequency level, if Israel tomorrow is asked to invade China, if a level of persecution frequency in Israel for saying no is high, then Israel could try to say no, but it would be invaded by United States. And by the way, I could be describing a biography of the chronicles of the time. But then if China have levels of persecution like a social credit score, if it wants to respond on the land of Israel, it would have to compete with frequencies where United States have atrocities not bigger than China and not yet social credit score. In fact, I said when they started depriving women rights in COVID, in Biden's regime, why am I saying that? Because a lot of people love to talk about Trump is their Bibi. And they have to remember that before the Trump that they don't like was the Biden that they do like. They were sitting at the committee of MK Ultra. And a woman had to choose between a lethal injection that is not euthanasia and interferes with the fifth vital sign and fertility, and not being able to abort. These were the elections during COVID. the interference with fertility was blue pill. And we know that cloning factories exist within Epstein-related affairs that are classified the project's budget not only of the American people. Societies that practice a ritual abuse and usually have also dissociation, they're practicing dissociation from being susceptible to colonization. Okay, what is a persecution that is masqueraded as something benevolent? And is run by a philosophy that through this torture there is Geulah or redemption, all run by oil and gas companies like Standard Oil, but calling their people underground or Machteret, and even resistance, where the underground, when the oil companies are the ones that are doing the atrocities of raping children and creating persecution, that people are dissociated and dissociating, and then what is persecuted is the nation, the bloodline, the origin, but not Standard Oil. And even the Epstein list that were created in same fashion as atrocities they committed, but not Standard Oil. All my love to France, and if we take a look at the case for Giselle, and we take a look at the executions of the guillotine. The guillotine executions can be seen like awakening from the frequency of the asleep Neptune society to the atrocities, and the guillotine as immediate death that is the answer to the torture rituals that created perpetrators that involved the hospitals. Blood on the wall, cow's blood or cattle blood on the walls of government buildings is not revolution. It's a bloodletting ritual that may be the very reason that they needed to rebel to begin with. Okay, it is not underground, it is not resistance. In fact, a French professor, we are Israeli, so we call by first name, and her name was Professor René. and uh, she came from France, and she was talking about the resistance movements. One of the concepts she coined in her research was, I don't know if she coined or um, referred to, was the concept of collective forgetting. Just join that and think about the case for Giselle. Like I said, there were in fact, I remember when she talked to us and she said in Europe, people do not honor women scholars as they treat men. Um, I don't know, I wasn't at conferences in Europe. But this is just showing us what is frequency. And when I take a look at astrology, I basically take a look at the sets of potentials for particular spectrum, which is the relations between the stars and the earth. And those spectrums have both physical, albeit what seems to be on a micro level or wave level, and they have energy, and they have egregores associated with them. This is why when we do talismans, we invoke qualities that we do want. And also when we do chart remediation, or when we tend to alive through our charts, we basically try to go for the better frequency of the planets. For example, Mars in not good frequency would be rape, torture. Mars in good frequency is Ares, kills the rapists, and so on and so forth. Mars in even excellent frequency can be killing the rapists, abolish slavery in a way that stands the test of time. Mars that is abrasive, that is rapey, and so on and so forth, like Moshe Dayan was Israeli army chief commander. This such Mars brought upon us the 1973 war, and just like all the blame shifters, he blamed it on actually the prime minister that did not trust the allied nations, which was Golda Meir. Not the allied nations, the nations around. Sorry, NATO. The nations around, the Arab nations. Yes, Israel is not in NATO, so we couldn't ask for Article 5. If Israel was in NATO, I think it would not pass a day. And I think we tried. If Israel or Palestine, by the way, joins NATO, no, it's seriously, somebody attacks Israel, Article 5. It's a war, it's a world war. Somebody attacks Israel, okay, you guys stop raping each other, say, but Oak Europe. Now I want to address something that is even more controversial. I mean, it's not, but maybe some people still believe that it is. Do we actually have different religions? As per the secret societies, we don't. I think there was these people, they practice all three religions. but also all other practices, basically, for what they know, they practice. It's not necessarily a negative thing, except for on what frequency is something practiced. If we sacrifice children to the goddess of fertility, or I even heard about human sacrifice for the god of war. And the god of war is to abolish rape and slavery. So it's about abolishing ritual abuse, 444, but and Pluto ingress the 444 foundation. But people venerate God of War by perpetuating the crimes that he annihilates. So what will happen to these people upon war? Either they would be like Sparta in perpetual war, and in Sparta it was known that Ares lost to Athena. Athena was strategic, but why? Because they raped. They used human sacrifice and raped. And in that case, Athena wins because she is strategy. Okay? Now, why does this work? Because with war, particularly with Neptune in Aries or in any Mars sign, war is frequency. Anything we do at war is a frequency. Also, anything we do at peace becomes a frequency at war. And targeting an individual, for example, particularly in a hidden way, in a non-visible way, but also in visible ways, is becoming invasion that the country doesn't know where it's coming from. And so Feynman, as a fan of energy crystals, when I saw Feynman talking about the cobalto, I don't know if it was, it sounds like cyanide, but I forgot the name. But this is basically a form of a radiation that in hospital, when it's properly maintained, can kill cancer. Again, there are better treatments than chemo. Feynman died of cancer. And one of the things that I received when I was watching a lot of his content and working on my thesis was the actual people that paid for finding a cure for cancer. And it was all around. So talking about it was, to me, also venerating the scientists that I listened to his content a lot and received a lot of good teachings from. And when we talk about this type of radiation, it affects the DNA in an invisible way. By the time it begins to show side effects, it's already, I'm not saying too late, but the Russians had something that negates that detoxifies, because the Russians had to work with radiation. But those things are not seen as such a big risk. And if people buy, let's say, old hospital, or even mine for crystals, then they could be exposed to that radiation. And by the time they may know, they may never know. It basically assassins the DNA cells from within. mRNA related things are, like I said, very risky, because they do to the body what the radiation does. The hope is that we will be as precise as that radiation, but to this level of exact involvement in a system that is way more dynamic and chaotic. We talk about nonlinear dynamic systems, and the anomalies between person to person or individual based medicine. Okay, I do not outrule that the technology for DNA or DNA interfering technology. Now people say mRNA does not affect, does not this, does not that. Well, we are not living in society which frequency is that we can attest that the research is not hidden from us. Is in academia, had colleagues in geography department and weather and ecosystems. They could not pass a research that claimed there is pollution. By the time we get research to show of pollution, it is already way worse than what research shows. And even in a psychiatry, only when they came up with another product that works on different receptors but causes dryness to the body, and dryness is inflammation that causes psychosis. Okay, what is inflammation? Violation of sense of self, like ritual abuse, this rape and torture is violation of sense of self, and it causes basically inflamed reaction in the body, and on a Neptune level or holistic level, it causes dissociation from the sense of self and susceptibility to mind control. It changes the electricity of the body to such radical extent. The frequency of threatening someone for speaking the truth and exposing the science is a frequency of where, let's say, country wants to defend itself from being accused in war crimes. They were actually extorted to commit by, let's say, Standard Oil. Then they are persecuted, and so a country has to take the blame of war crimes and funnel even more public money that was meant to rehabilitate, so to prevent genocide, democide, extortion codes, and so on and so forth. Okay, what happens? How do they recruit the people? They put people in helplessness situation. If it's their own, then they do this with their own tortures and so on. If it's not their own, then they say, okay, if a person shows the willingness to do things, then they get shelter and then they get more things. For example, the reason I got funding for not PhD, first degree, was not because I wanted to unalive myself after the subprime. It was because I was in debt, and they believed that I would be willing to do criminal things. When that did not happen, then I received no help. And at the same time, MK Ultra and Monarch Project particular, the butterfly, and the Red Shoes Project began to overtake Israel, which is associated with Epstein. And also of where the health system, healthcare, and this was around before and after COVID. Now, in Aries, the healthiest frequency is the frequency, a sense of self, individual sovereignty, the I am. Those who participate in bringing the frequency down by purpose as form of destruction, basically, but they create their own downfall. There are many people that can live without the Standard Oil in, off grid, and so on and so forth. When they become less and less opposable, then people grow sovereignty more and more, and this is why I said the best frequency is to abolish rape and slavery. For example, when there is a lady that is trafficked, is not even working lady because she's trafficked, and there's no such thing as sex work. It's all trafficking. And when she closes herself in shelter, and everybody wants to get mad, and I say to them, listen, take care that she has house to stay, that she has place to stay, or would bring more atrocities on us. We can go to the stairs. And I forbid anybody to shout at her or to be aggressive to her. I basically am safeguarding the neighborhood because I raise the frequency of the neighborhood to frequency level of the sovereignty. It's not the best frequency. They would still need to do something that, for example, lady that brought her some blankets and some food, but this lady also raised frequencies of entire neighborhood. And we must understand, if the shelters need to be open for the homeless people to have place to stay, there would be perpetual state of around emergency. I'm not saying perpetual war state, but the level of emergency that would necessitate keeping shelters open. When I was in Netherlands, because Israel had no compatible solution during COVID for people that escaped violence that was created by ritual abuse in society. Then the shelter in Netherlands was only open for the lockdown. It means that my security escape in a violence was the people's lockdown. And if I think about, let's say, the government were to make such decision, where the frequency, collective frequency in the nation is of lockdown, and yet they know that it's not really excuse okay, for this, but for people that are homeless, this is shelter. For people escape violence, this is shelter. This is going a place where they're not ritually abused. And these people know ritual abuse. is very difficult decision to make. And also that was the time where they changed, where the municipality had to give address for people that were homeless, because previously if they did not have address, they would have no BSN, which they would need for everything. They would need to receive, what is welfare, to begin to be able to work, to begin to be able to rehabilitate. I even met a person, he was checking the tickets, and he said to me he lived 11 years in Dubai. When he came back home, he was lucky to have his mom still alive, because if not for his mom, he would not have a BSN as a Dutch citizen, which, by the way, was my problem as well. But by the time that I would receive address, the shelter would be gesloten, closed. And like I said, I don't know what would be safer for me, but this is the truth. So we see how it took for this global emergency for people to be able to have approximate access to their own individual, very, very basic rights. The rights not to be ritually abused, to trafficked, violated. And by the way, when there are individual rights, this prevents what I tend to do, political assassination. If person has sense of self, then they can be rational. And rationality says to assassinate person is irrational. Okay, because if a problem, I don't know, if Standard Oil runs extortion calls, what do I care about assassinating prime minister? It's not a level of interference that would make the regime more representative of me and my rights. But if not, then anybody could hack into the nervous system and make people do really funny things. In fact, I experienced that. I was doing channeling experiment, but also I was tortured. Channeling experiment alone is safe, because when we are regulated nervous system is safe, but because I was tortured, then I dealt with those things that our leaders also deal with as they make a decision, for example, on when to activate Article 5. So I hope in this video I have good takeaways. The fact that when we say frequency, we are actually talking about something that can be even trackable and observable when people declassify certain technologies. And when we talk about God, we talk about egregore, and it's where many people activate a certain frequencies. And it's important when we are in anger if Mars is in a Sagittarius or Pisces with a Jupiter sign, to remember which egregore we funnel our anger through and reclaim our egregore. Sadhana teaches us that we can basically tend to regulate our own nervous system in the collective nervous system. Why Sedna traffic was famine or no fishes and so on and so forth? Very simple. It was the frequency of choosing oil over salmons. And the way we choose oil over salmons, we will not have salmons. We may have oil in all the revenues, but we basically take the wealthiest source of food and sacrifice it for something that may not sustain the country and country sovereignty. And we saw indeed Norwegian being attacked. Albeit Norwegian acted very smartly with its resources. It did not go so quickly to course of the resources, but still, Sedna's story. It's very sad because even solo traveling BIPOC women said in Norway they felt okay. And I have to admit, even in Netherlands, when I was there, relatively felt okay. There was several incidents of not okay. But a frequency is an overall frequency, an overall tendency. And if to receive actual housing, then they would expect me to commit crimes. And this would be crimes towards my country, crimes towards the Netherlands that I did not agree to commit. And also, I did not agree to commit a crime against Israel. People may think what they want about the country, genocide and not genocide. I see the level of analysis of extortion calls energy company as way more potent in addressing prevention of genocide, democide, terror, and so on. And then, if the link to Israel is to that intensity, then Israel will address the implications. But I rather deal with the actual problem than target a country or act against the country where tomorrow it can be another country, but it wouldn't be another problem.